Echo chambers can be funny things. You would say things in an echo chamber that you wouldn't normally say in general public, especially if you don't know the political mesh of the crowd that you are engaging with. You would also say things that you would hope and pray that your elected officials would never say out loud for fear that they would be eviscerated by the mainstream press, even if you are hoping deeply on the inside that your elected officials are thinking that and would say that in your echo chamber. But sometimes your elected official will go in and say something that's being said in the echo chamber without thinking anything bigly of it. And that will strike into a controversy of epic proportions. And this is what happened this past week to California District 15 Representative Eric Swalwell. Now, the majority of my Twitter followers at this point already know that I have come to blows with Eric Swalwell once before. He decided to speak without thinking about the border situation and the fact that we were sending troops down there. He decided to tell us how much it was going to cost to have the troops going down there and how he wished that they were going to be home for Thanksgiving. I sat him down and explained to him the fact that most of those troops weren't going to be going home for Thanksgiving anyway because they were active duty and didn't have leave. They were stateside, and as being active duty and stateside, they were also getting paid their regular salary for already being here. But Swalwell came into a newer and bigger controversy this past week as he started to go on Twitter and defend an article that he submitted to the op-ed page of the USA Today against various right-wingers who oppose the idea of a mandatory buyback and especially oppose the idea of prosecution for people who will not comply with a government buyback of certain weapons. Now, earlier on in the video, I had a small talk about echo chambers and how I felt that having echo chambers on social media might be dangerous. But I do have to give a pass to social media because of the way that they made this story happen and the fact that they brought it to light 6 months after the original article was posted to the USA Today. On May 3rd, 2018, Representative Swalwell put an op-ed in the USA Today where he talked about the fact that the velocity of bullets coming out of an assault-style military rifle, which is what he would call a standard semi-automatic with some basic add-ons to make it a little bit lower recoil and make it look a little bit scarier, is that much higher than a 9mm pistol and can cause 3 times more damage than such a small weapon. Swalwell implied in the article that the only solution out there to prevent any more damage from going on in the country is to have a mandatory buyback of all semi-automatic weapons in the country at $1,000 per weapon. With an estimated 15 million semi-automatic rifles in this country, that is a cost of right around $15 billion to have a government buyback of assault-style weapons so defined by Representative Swalwell. I can't speak to what brought this May 3rd article to the forefront 6 months later, nor can I speak to what brought the article to the attention of Dana Lash 6 months later from NBC News that was dated on the same day. But something caused journalist John Cardillo and Dana Lash to suddenly be paying attention to the fact that this is something that Swalwell wanted to do, and very openly wanted to do. Both of them commented on Twitter about it. Let's start with what Lash has to say. Dana Lash tweeted, "High-ranking Democrat Eric Swalwell calls for confiscation of semi-automatic rifles, using $15 billion of taxpayer dollars to do it, and proposes criminally prosecuting those who don't participate." Swalwell was so proud of this, he retweeted and replied in the retweet the fact, "She's not lying. We should ban assault weapons by buying them back or restricting them to ranges/clubs. Enough is enough." Now, Lash's tweet was very sane and very calm. Swalwell was able to talk about it immediately. It got a lot of likes and a very small amount of comments with it. But Cardillo's tweet seemed to be the one that sparked the outrage that's going around this country right now, and the reason that we're talking about this to begin with. Let's see what Cardillo had to say and where it went from there. Cardillo tweets, "Make no mistake, Democrats want to eradicate the Second Amendment, ban and seize all guns, and have all the power rest with the state. These people are dangerously obsessed with power." This is a common argument with proponents of the Second Amendment, myself included. The belief behind it is the fact that the amendment was put into place so that the people of the nation would have the means to rise up and take over the government if the government got too large and started to overstep its bounds into the freedoms of the people that the Founding Fathers enshrined into the Constitution. The way that these buybacks are being proposed with threats of prosecution along with them makes me feel like this is a reasonable belief and a reasonable fear of people gaining too much power in the government. And what's shocking is the fact that the tweets that followed this in this same tweet thread seem to make this entirely rational fear into a grim reality and a big reason why I believe we have the Second Amendment. The tweet that I cited from Cardillo was a quoted retweet from Joe Biggs, who added a comment above that said, "So basically, Representative Swalwell wants a war, because that's what you would get. You're out of your fucking mind if you think I'll give up my rights and give the government all the power." This was immediately replied to by Swalwell, who, eerily enough, said, "It would be a short war, my friend. The government has nukes. Too many of them. But they're legit. I'm sure if we talked we could find some common grounds to protect our communities." Biggs replies, "So our government would nuke its own country in order to take guns. Wow." Swalwell's tweet sparked outrage among the Twitter community, including people tweeting back at him their dissent and himself walking back the comments that he made. And I'll talk about a reason why it's still dangerous for him to make those comments a bit later in the video, but let's look at some of the backlash to this. In a tweet thread with Chicago talk show host Joe Walsh, Swalwell said, "Joe, it's sarcasm. He said he's going to war with America if gun legislation was passed. I told him the government has nukes. God forbid we use sarcasm." To which Walsh replied, "Eric, I get that your use of nukes was sarcasm, and yep, Twitter doesn't do nuance. But understand how many of us gun-clinging Americans recoil at the word confiscation, and will do whatever we have to do to defend our guns against a government that would take them. Thanks." Additionally, replying to the final tweet in the thread that I showed earlier, Swalwell replied to Joe Biggs, "Don't be so dramatic. No one is nuking anyone or threatening that. I'm telling you, this is not the 18th century. The argument that you would go to war with your government if an assault weapons ban was in place is ludicrous and inflames the gun debate, which is what you want." Swalwell doubles down in his defense of his statements in a tweet that he put out solo. America's gun debate in one thread. 1. Propose a buyback of assault weapons. 2. Gun owner says he'll go to war with USA if that happens. 3. I sarcastically point out that USA isn't losing to his assault weapon. It's not the 18th century. 4. I'm called a tyrant. 5. Zero progress. And finally, to end all of this mess, on Monday, Swalwell put out a tweet in which he cited the objective and neutral fact-checking site Snopes, where they said that no, Swalwell didn't actually threaten a nuclear war against the country. Swalwell tweets, "Well, this should end the faux outrage from gun groups. Snopes debunks Daily Caller and others who claimed I made a serious threat to nuke gun owners. Let's move on to what really matters. Ensuring our right to be safe is paramount. Hashtag enough is enough." Now, I am not in the camp that believes that Representative Swalwell wants to turn the United States into the fallout wasteland over a few assault weapons. There are several steps that would go between there, but it says something to the fact that Swalwell went straight from gun buyback to nuclear war in a single tweet when the idea of being challenged on his legislation was brought up in another tweet. And that's something that we do need to talk about. Now, at the end of the tweet where Swalwell laid out his timeline, he expresses outrage over the fact that he is called a tyrant and that zero progress is made. However, I don't feel that this is too far from the truth, and while, as I said, I don't believe that Swalwell intends to use the nukes to do it, the fact of the matter remains that as soon as there was a challenge made to a legislation that Swalwell brought forward, he used a government one-upsmanship. He said, essentially, with the fact that we have nukes, even though there are several steps that he would have to use before he got to nukes, the fact that no matter what, if he can get that legislation passed, that means that we will comply, and there isn't going to be a choice about it. And if we don't comply, he's going to send men with more and larger guns to our homes in order to come and take the guns by force and either kill us or put us into prison for the simple fact of trying to defend our freedom against a government that has become too large and too powerful. The fact that Swalwell went straight to nukes puts a different kind of fear in my heart over the one-upsmanship of the government, but the fact of the matter remains the same. If somebody were to go through and challenge his legislation publicly, as Joe Biggs did, then he could have gone out and said tanks, or Blackhawks, or special ops, or automatic weapons, and all of them would have carried the same sentiment. You do what I say, or I will come out and kill you and make you comply no matter what. For almost the entire history of our country, the fact that the citizens of the country had the means and the ability to go to war with the country was a constant threat to an overreaching government that wanted to grow too big and have too much control over the lives of its citizens. And there's always been an implicit respect of the population in which the government didn't want to go to war back with the people of its constituency. But this series of tweets from Swalwell really changes that, and it makes me start to realize the fact that if we don't comply with what the government wants, the government is perfectly willing to go to war with us in order to reach the ends that they want to put forward. This should cement into our culture the idea and the means of the Second Amendment in order to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government, and this should cement in the minds of the legislators that will go forward from this Congress forward the fact that maybe we should start lifting some of these weapons bans so that we do have the constant threat of war against the government to check the powers of the government, because we do want to fight a war against the government that we, the people, who are a free people of this nation, can actually win. What do you think about the Second Amendment? What do you think about the ability to rise up against a tyrannical government? And where do you stand on the gun argument? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.